Norwegian builder Skilso is a very easy brand to understand in terms of its fleet. There are just 4 boats at 2 hull lengths, 35-footer and a 39-footer with or without a flybridge. And we've come to Oslo to check out the larger of those coupe models, and it's this, the Skilso 39 Panorama. Now, like its sister brand Viknes, which is also built at the same factory in Bergen, this Skilso makes tremendous use of the length, tremendous use of the volume, and actually it's very voluminous because this 39-footer is actually 12'6" in the beam. There's plenty to talk about at the back end here, and you'd think we'd talk about that right now, wouldn't you, given that we're right next to it. But I want to board up here because this is particularly cool. I like this a lot. It's a side gate, as you can see, directly next to the skipper's door, but rather than just sliding to the side or opening it up on a hinge, because we've got very narrow side decks to make the very most of that beam internally, well, it hinges straight down and over and gives you a little boarding step, which I'll use right now to get on board. It's a very comfortable way to do it and a very sensible solution to the conundrum involving all that beam inside that saloon. But let's head aft and take a quick look at this swim platform now, because this is the first boat to use this extended platform, so there's good space back here, lots of volume in here for your fenders and your lines. That's drained, of course, and there's a little button over here, as you can see, and that is for your tender retrieval system, which is just underneath here. The basic principle being that at the touch of a button, this will retrieve your tender from the water, lift it out and bring it parallel to the back end of the boat. We haven't actually seen that in action, and this is actually a prototype, so we're not going to see that today, but the principle is certainly a sound one. Now, as on the Skilsos we saw at the Dusseldorf Boat Show, well, we've got a very safe, secure cockpit. Uses that entire beam. We've got quite narrow bulwarks there, as you can see. So loads of internal volume. A little step up, and what we have is a huge C-shaped dinette, big enough, I would say, for about 7 people, with a table that folds out. You can drop that into the space, as you can see from that telescopic leg. But actually, this section of the dinette here is optional. If I move over towards the port side deck and peer down, you'll see that you take a step down off that side deck and into the cockpit via this secondary step. And that seems to make no sense with this in the way because it's blocked. But as I say, this is optional. It turns the L-shaped dinette into a C-shaped unit, ramps up the usability of that, the capacity of that. And that's important because if the Viknes brand is slightly more active and workmanlike, well, this is about recreational sophistication, a little bit of extra decadence. And that is why, in contrast to the Viknes brand, we don't actually have a second Helm as standard here. You can spec one, but what they've done with the standard package is give you nice big doors that fold and open right out and a sliding panel to port, so you can integrate these spaces a little bit better. If we look up above us, we've got a huge overhead sunroof here. That comes as standard, and it's double lined for the inclement weather you often get in this part of the world. Really impressive, that. And down beneath us here, well, this is the engine hatch, and it gives you access to a pair of diesel inboards here. We've got 8LV 370s, a pair of Yanmars here on V drives. You can also have those on stern drives should you choose, but the vast majority of people, about 90%, go for the V drives for the reduced maintenance, and of course that generates a good bit of space aft for a bit of baggage, as well as things like your calorifier on the starboard side and your lithium battery bank on the port side for your domestic loads. Now, in common with the Viknes brand, there are a couple of other things to notice that I find quite rewarding. The hinging for the seats means that they're one-handed opening all the way around. In this forward unit, where you don't have any storage in there because this is set aside for an optional fridge. to supplement the one that comes as standard just inside in the saloon. And actually, we'll get to this in a bit, but you can have an additional optional fridge of a similar size to that in the forward part of this port-dinette as well. But as I say, this panorama model also comes as a flybridge model, in which case the steps go over here and you have a single door in the centre. Takes you up onto the higher deck, and it only adds about 21,000 euros to the price, which is about 5% of the overall purchase price, which seems to me like very good value. But the whole point with this panorama model, and the reason it's actually called a panorama, it's nothing to do with these big side windows and the big lateral views. It's more to do with what you see up top. If I pop into the saloon briefly before we go to the foredeck and slide these back out of the way, you'll see that actually this roof structure is more glass than it is fiberglass, which means you get a panoramic view of the sky, which sounds odd when you say it, but actually is quite rewarding, and it's exactly what you want to see on a non-fly model. And if I slide these back, well, not only do they deliver proper shade and shelter, but also they've got aluminium inside this fabric just to give you proper insulation as well. But let's step outside and head around the broader starboard side deck, up a little step here. As I say, relatively narrow, as you can see from my feet. They've wasted no space. If I turn the camera around, you can see that I'm rubbing my shoulder on the superstructure here, but it's not a problem. It might be if you're a particularly big fella, but I'm not that, and I don't struggle with it at all. Past the side gate, which, as I say, is directly next to the skipper's side door, which makes loads of sense. Up another step onto the foredeck, and here we have really raised mouldings. That comes up to about knee level, this raised island sunbed. And actually the guardrails, they come up to the thigh, even though we've just taken a step up, so it feels very secure up here. Lots of tread plate machined into the fiberglass. And if I spin around and face aft, well, that's big enough for a couple of people, I would say. We do have a slightly contoured, slightly raised headrest just for extra comfort there, but in terms of the size of the moulding itself, you couldn't say that it's particularly well used with this simple, slender central section big enough for two. There is, though, of course, if we lift that cushion, a little hatch to access the cabin down below. And if you walk back down this elevated port side deck, well, actually the breadth of that is not too bad at all. Look at that, I can fit my feet side by side. There's a good tow rail, again elevated guardrails, a good rail in the rooftop as well. And as you can see, a huge sunroof above the Helm itself, which again comes as standard. This is the curtailed step down into that cockpit I was talking about. So as things stand with that additional unit forward, I've got to clamber over this seating. Apologies if I mess up your cushions. Get myself back down into the cockpit and look forward into the saloon, which is, of course, as I've already intimated, the beneficiary of those narrow side decks. 12-foot 6-inch beam, and the space in here for a 39-footer is tremendous. It's organised very much like some of those boats in the Viknes range, with a port dinette and a starboard galley with these big doors wide open and no steps up to the flybridge. Integration between these two spaces is pretty good. And if we look over to this dinette first, well, for a start, the finish is very attractive indeed. Lovely pale oak style woods. And we have a couple of chairs, stools, which simply swing out like that, enabling you to accommodate. I would say if we just swing this forward unit forward as well, I'd say that's big enough to accommodate up to, I'm going to say 8 people, and then you can tell me I'm wrong. I usually am a bit optimistic with my assessments of these things. And if we swing that one out as well, well, as you can see, you can just about squeeze through, even with that jutting out into the central companionway. Let's stick those back in there and look over to the starboard galley. And as I do so, it's worth mentioning the reason that we don't need to turn this into an additional double berth is because we have 3 double cabins down below, and we'll look at those in a moment. First though, as I say, the galley. The TV's already up to show us exactly where that pops out, just behind that work surface. And we have a gas cooker here, a gas hob, gas beneath glass, which is designed to give you all the benefits of gas cooking, the controllability without the associated dangers. A little oven underneath there, and a 2-part sink with a splashback to protect the helm seats from the water there. Plenty of storage too. Fairly simple drawers aft, but if I look forward, this is quite cool. Open this little door up and then slide this forward, you'll see that we get access to these little troughs, which would otherwise be pretty inaccessible. So it's nicely arranged that. While I'm down here, you can also see that that is very much a raised dinette, and that's good, of course, because it generates that volume down below while also giving us a proper view forward when you're underway. Nice big side windows and a big opening window on the port side to supplement that big skipper's side door there. And actually, while we're here, let's have a little look underneath here, because this is a really nice touch too, and this comes as standard. I haven't actually practiced this, so I don't know if I can operate it. Let's have a look. Oh, it really is. No, that's a drawer. I've got that completely wrong. What have we got here? Oh, no, that is not it at all. Maybe we do that. Okay, I'm just going to try to do this one-handed. There we go. If we release this catch, out slides this enormous step. A little bit of storage in there, which is very handy. But it means that with this sunroof open, I can step up onto this elevated platform and look at that for a skipper's view. That is fantastic. Really practical, that. When you're coming alongside, you need to speak to people on the pontoons. And the rest of the dash is pretty well arranged too. It's quite sparse, quite spare. There's nothing you don't need. We've got a 19-inch plotter up top. You can actually extend this across and have a pair of plotters should you like. Plenty of manual switchgear and some proportional bound stern thrusters, plus your Humphrey tabs and your throttles over here on the starboard side. And if I just ease out onto that starboard side deck, where it really is a very practical sort of setup. Looks like a very easy boat indeed to helm single-handed. And as I say, we've got that side gate directly next to us there. A cleat tying off points. Easy access forward and aft. And the compass a little way ahead, but directly in our eye line, which is exactly where you'd want it. But let's take a little look down below, because 3 permanent double cabins on a 39-footer is a very impressive haul. As you'd expect, there's a bow cabin up forward. There is an additional cabin further aft beneath that saloon floor on the port side. And if I look over to the starboard side, a slightly smaller version right there. But again, a double cabin. And that means that we have a section between those aft cabins and the forward cabin with a couple of compartments, one to port, one to starboard. And if we take a look to port first, well, that is a permanent dedicated shower compartment, which means that over on the starboard side we've got a dedicated heads compartment. And that, I think, is a lovely thing. This arrangement does mean that nobody gets an ensuite. Basically all 3 cabins, all 6 people share these 2 compartments. But if you're a keen cruiser, having a separate shower compartment and a dedicated heads compartment makes all kinds of sense. Now there are options. Apparently you can use this boat as a 2-cabin version, in which case this port cabin is expanded inboard, is expanded slightly forwards. The bow cabin then steals a little bit of extra space here, and we just have some storage on this port side. Meanwhile, on the starboard side, well, this heads compartment goes through to a shower compartment here, and we have additional utility space with washers and dryers further aft. So presumably the 2-cabin version would be for small families who want to enjoy long-term cruises, but far and away the most popular layout is this one with 3 cabins. So let's move forward, take a look at that bow cabin first. Substantially raised, as you can see. That takes it up above the most critical point of hull taper, gives you good space. But it does mean, of course, that headroom at the head end is slightly limited because you're closer to that deck head. You just about sit up in bed at an angle with a mountain of pillows, but there's not quite as much as you might expect given how elevated that foredeck sunbed is. That said, we got plenty of space for a 6-footer at the entry point and a little bit more. We have good access to both sides of the bed, as you can see. And we also have, because it's so elevated, some good storage beneath the bed in terms of 4 nice deep drawers. There's also some high level storage, symmetrical on both sides, a couple of hatches there. And if we open this little door on the aft bulkhead, well, that's a handy space too, a little bit of hanging storage. But if we head aft and take a look at the guest accommodation, where you can immediately see some chief differences in terms of the level of the deck head. On the starboard side, you've got a decent bit of vertical elevation beneath the dash itself, but then it dips down where the galley comes into play. On the port side, beneath that dinette, where you've got much more in the way of headroom to play with. So we're going there first, take a seat on this changing seat at the entry point and look aft. And that's a good size, pretty lofty. Not huge windows, but relatively deep, and there's a couple of them, so it certainly doesn't feel at all claustrophobic in here, and the pale woods help with that. We've got reading lights at the head end there with plenty of room to sit up in bed. We've also got some decent storage there too. And there's an additional window there, of course, and if I close over the door, I think we've also got a little bit of storage just tucked in there. It's only about the width of a fist and a bit, but it's worth using. And just as on the Viknes brand, well, Skilso makes every single inch count, and you've got to do that on a boat of limited proportions. Let's head over to the starboard side and take a look at that accommodation. Well, we've got another double bed, we've got more storage, another changing seat, some more storage behind the door there, another 3 windows. You know, it's not luxurious particularly, but it's well proportioned. And if you sleep as intended with your heads at the forward end here, well, it feels pretty voluminous and wide open as well. Well, we've already spoken about the Helm a little bit, and obviously the skipper's side door makes a big difference, and it's a particularly wide aperture. You do have to stoop a little to get yourself out, but that's not a problem at all. And once you do, as I say, access fore and aft, access to the pontoon as well, is first class, plus access to your tying off points and your cleat. Love these seats. Same order of seats as we've seen on the Viknes. They're absolutely first class. They've got lovely sort of lumbar support as well. But in the bolster position, I do find my visibility slightly restricted. I find myself a bit elevated as a 6-footer. So if I pop that seat down, that is a lot more comfortable. It doesn't shift fore and aft, but you can, of course, just shift yourself forward on the seat itself to access your various touch points. The steering is not adjustable, but as I say, in ergonomic terms, as is so often the case with boats from this part of the world, everything does feel like it's exactly where it ought to be. And that's by no means a universal thing in the marine industry, let me tell you. Now, we're on single lever here, which is the way I like to do it. It simplifies things. And we've got our Humphrey tabs, which are on auto. There's not much of a wind run in today anyway, so windage will be very minimal, particularly as this is not the flybridge model anyway. And what we have here beneath that aft deck, as I pointed out, is the smaller engine options on V-drives. We've got the 8LV 370s. You can have those on stern drives too, but not many people are opt for that, of course. And the fact that we got the V-drives means the engines are slightly further forward, which is good in terms of the weight distribution as well. So let's get a little bit up to speed and see how she does. There's certainly a good bit of poke. We're already doing 20 knots. A little bit of bow lift, but nothing substantial. And actually, as those tabs kick in, that starts to drop a little bit, which is quite nice. Now what I'll do is close up this skipper's side door, because the refinement levels are pretty good as well. We're seeing around about 65 to 72 decibels at sensible cruising speeds. I'll spin around for a second and just head the other way so we can have a little play. There's a decent bit of heel in that turn as well. And some excellent pace retention. This is not a lightweight boat. It doesn't feel lightweight. It feels quite substantially built. And as I say, it's got a 12-foot 6-inch beam, in excess of 8 tons light. So you don't necessarily expect it to behave with that kind of agility. It's certainly more agile than I anticipated it would be. It feels like a slightly smaller boat in the way it behaves. You can, of course, open up the visibility on the port side by opening up that sunroof. But in terms of efficiency, well, this is a good place to be. We're running at about 25 knots now. And I know it's at between 10 and 25 knots. The fuel flow is pretty consistent. We see around about 4 litres per nautical mile. Now, we got twin 450 litre tanks here, so with 20% redundancy in the system, around about 720 litres. So we ought to be good for a range of around about 180 nautical miles. And yeah, at the top end, just in excess of 31 knots. That'll increase to 4.5 litres per nautical mile, so it drops to around about 160 miles, but it's still very long-legged. As I say, the pickup is really genuinely good. There's much more grunt than you anticipate for a boat of this kind of scale and volume and weight. But despite the fact it looks like quite a workman-like sort of platform, this is actually a full planing hull, and it absolutely feels that way. In terms of the pickup, in terms of the efficiency, and also in terms of how game it is with a heel in a turn. It's a bit of a plaything, it has to be said. Now, if you opt for the stern drives, you could increase the pace beyond 31, 32 knots. They tell me to around about 36, 37. But by the same token, the appeal of low maintenance is likely to trump that, and their sales figures prove it, in fact. They tell me that around about 90% of people who buy this boat will buy it with the V-drives. And I suspect that the UK market won't be dissimilar. Since we tested the Skilso 39 Panoramic in Oslo, things have changed a little bit. The Düsseldorf Boat Show has opened its doors, and this boat has been rebranded under the Viknes name. So it's now called the Viknes S40, the flagship of that fleet. And that's all part of a fresh direction for Viknes, where they're bringing together all of the Skilso boats under the single Viknes brand name. Now, under that new name, the S40 is likely to become better than the boat we tested, because it's going to get 35 centimetres of extra length, a more stylish superstructure apparently, and also a subtly optimised deck layout. But that rebranding does, of course, bring it directly into line with the established boats of the Viknes fleet, not least that really excellent Viknes 10 we tested last summer. Now, you could argue that that smaller boat does everything this boat does, but on a more compact platform with a single engine for less money. But viewed in the proper context, this S40 is substantially bigger. It has better heads facilities, it has extra space in that third cabin, more flexibility in the lower deck layout. And when you factor in the larger galley, the 2 helm seats, the improved inside-outside integration, that extra bit of space all round, the option of an affordable flybridge, something the V10 lacks, and much bigger, brighter hull windows, then you'd have to say that this S40 slots quite neatly in as the new flagship of the Viknes fleet, without the slightest need for any deference to the cruisers lower down the range. Now, whether you agree with that or not, please do let us know what you think in the section below. If you've enjoyed this video, hit the like button, and if you want to see more videos like this in the future, then make sure you subscribe to the Motorboat and Yachting channel.